computer. Okay, great. And
Yeah.
look, we can always stop it if we want to have a discussion or anything like that.
Yeah, and so we're going to have a discussion now. So maybe just pause the recording now, and we. So we're talking here about values and behavior, and I've explained how we can turn negative behavior, negative values into their opposite, the positive values. But not just the positive values, but the actual positive behavior that's in a group. And once we do that, we set simple rules for behavior in a group. And here's an example of a group that I worked with that really, really went mad at this. They really loved it, and it was actually a group involved in music and Irish tradition, which you will notice from it. And so they took each value, which really meant something to them. There's history behind all of those. And you see there, one guy here has said generosity of spirit. So it came up there. And they listed loads of actions that they would do under each, you know. And so leadership, awareness of the leadership role we can play is central to our actions and decision making. We strive for leadership. They went on and had more. The inclusivity came up here. We welcome people of every race and creed. We encourage and nurture people with that, and even in respect of level of experience that they were doing, which is relevant here. So that's just an example of people, you know, uh, you know, taking on something right at the beginning in terms of values and behavior. And I'm going to come back in the room now. And what I should say is, because it's been recorded, maybe just you might want to turn off your screen if you don't want your picture to be on. Otherwise, don't mind. So, um, uh, so I'll come back in the room just briefly for a discussion. You might want to sort of turn off the record at this point again, Sandy. Sorry now, budding again. So we'll do something about communication and consultation. So now here we have a group, and questions come up this morning about how do you get a mandate? I love that question. How do you get a mandate? So this should help you get that mandate. How do you listen? It should help with something like that as well. And eventually we'll come to priorities. But this is certainly going to be all about mandate. And I know it's for a community group, but it could be for any group, and you could match this accordingly. And it's based on my own work with groups. It's not based on anything I got from literally a book. It's based on years of working with things and putting together the sort of things that worked for me, and that I thought might work for somebody else. So first, just a recap on what is a vision, because very often people, when you're starting out with a group and you're working with it, you get confusion between vision and mission and all those sort of lovely statements, you know. So a vision is what we expect of other people. So if we're in a community, it's not what we want to do is the vision. It's the impact we want on somebody else. We want our town to be a modern digital transition town. We want our area to be full of biodiversity. We want our group to be feeling fully empowered in what they do and accessing services. It's the impact we want to achieve on somebody else. So that's about the generosity. If we come into a group, it's about looking outside the group into what are we here to achieve for others, not for ourselves. That goes back to that selfishness point. So vision takes you out of that. The mission is about, well, here's what we're going to do. And provided it's based on that vision, it's good. So communications, we talked about communications then come up here as well, and it's mixed up with this. And communications is a two-way thing. It's not really how good am I at actually speaking. It's actually how good am I at listening. There's a reason why my eyes and my ears are above my mouth. Because whoever invented them thought they were more important. They're nearer to my brain. So, your mouth is nearer to your foot, which is very often why you put your foot in it. So, you know, so so listening is the key to communication. There's an argument about the wind and the rain, and they had a fight as to who would be most effective in getting a guy to take his coat off. And the wind said, "I will." Blew very hard, and all the guy did was put his arms around his coat and kept his coat on. The sun came out and shone, he took his coat off. So the softly, the listening is the key, the first key. So this is a lot of work I do, and I want to bring in some of the themes that you talked about here. And so this is how you engage with people. So we can engage, first of all, who are they? Who are our stakeholders? Who are the people that's actually important to us? Because you need to know who they are.
Could you go to full screen on the slide? I'm just seeing the slide on the side.
Oh, is everyone seeing the slide just on the side?
No, you're full screen for me.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. Okay, maybe there's
so maybe go up to the top right hand corner, and there's gallery view, and play around with that, because you might be on a different I clicked a gallery view that mightn't be right for you. So basically, you know, who are our stakeholders? And I have a slide on that, and how are we going to engage with them? And doing your own survey is actually, you know, SurveyMonkey is a great way of just getting lots of information from people, you know, by them tapping into their phones, into their mobiles, and everything like that. That group that I was working with there, actually, it's relevant to a particular question that came up there about how do we make sense of what's been said. So one of the things that happened there was, in that group, you won't believe it, but there was about 80 different ideas. It was bigger than that. The picture doesn't cover everything, and this is obviously pre-COVID. And I didn't have a beard, as you can see with that. But about 80 projects come up, and you could feel overwhelmed. If I was a representative from that group, I'm going away and thinking, how do I go to the county council with 80 projects? Some of them looking like each other and something. We did an exercise in a follow-up meeting to that on themes, and we identified about 7 themes that these projects fitted into. And I then came back and said to the group, under each of those themes and the projects that fit into them, what are the priorities? And I'll come back to how we prioritise things. So then we're able to go to the county council with 5 themes that make sense and the key projects in each theme. And in a way, for anyone representing a group, it's a key thing to be able to do, is when everyone is mentioning anything, say, right, let's get a flip chart, or even let's just use my head and write it down and think, there's actually 2 themes going on here. One is people are dissatisfied with the interaction with the county council, and they want to lobby, and they're not listened to, and the local councillor doesn't talk to them, or does talk to them too much, or whatever. It's an advocacy issue. There's another issue about the fact that, you know, there's a particular building needs mending, it needs repairing, it needs fixing, and there's a load of issues around. So now I have 2 issues. And the one issue is a lobbying issue, the other issue is a practical issue. So it's breaking them down into manageable parts. and here's an exercise I had done at some stage with a group. It was actually a cancer support group, and a local cancer support group. And as an example of saying to them, who are your stakeholders? You know, they did an exercise of like, well, here's the people who use our service. Here's the internals, if you like. Here's the people who do business with us. Here's the people, the professionals that are important for us. Here's the people who are important with the money. And here's the people who influence stuff. And in a way, in our communication, there wasn't a general answer like, well, just communicate well, you know. But who are you communicating with? And each of these has a different way of being communicated with. You have to break everything down, really, in terms of communicating with your stakeholders. So one other thing that comes up here, and it came up in terms of the relationship with the county council, for instance, and this is up and down the country, it's not unique to Cork or anywhere else, is the relationship. And I had this in a county I was dealing with. And in a way, a relationship with any local group and any county council should be an adult relationship. And what do I mean by an adult relationship? It means that both are responsible. So if I'm a local community group, I am responsible for my attitude, my behaviour, my politeness, my listening to the representative from Cork County Council. Maybe much bigger than me, but I am still responsible for how that relationship happens. So is the County Council. And it's the question of the two coming together. But if I go in like a child and say, you're not listening to me, I want this, I want that, you're not doing enough, bang, bang, bang. All any county councillor, any other organisation will want to do is go away and find a way of answering you and disappearing off you. So the key is to develop the relationship between adults. And you'll only be an adult if you're actually representing the group rather than your own opinion. So here's the key part of a presentation that I'm going to give you now in terms of powerful questions and powerful answers. And it works for almost any group. And it is something I devised, it's something I use, it's something I'll be using even in another 3 weeks with the group, where there'll be about 200 people in a room. So it has to work, or I'll be kicked out of rooms. So first of all, every group needs to sort of know what their vision is. But you can't ask most groups what their vision is, really, because a lot of people get their head around a vision. It's a difficult word. So you don't ask the question, what is your vision? You ask the question, what would success look like in 5 years in your community, or in your lobby group, or in your whatever pillar that you're in? What would success look like in 5 years? Or another question, what would failure look like? Or another question, describe the people who you'd most like to see benefiting from the success of this project. If you answer those questions or get a group, they're literally telling you what their vision is, but it comes across as a practical question. The next thing you come to is, well, what projects would make that vision happen? So now you're coming down practical, and you're saying, what projects will achieve that success? So for instance, I want more enterprise in my town, there's not enough in it. The vision might be, I want to be higher levels of employment in my town. Well, what project would achieve that? A new set of business units in my town that would compile that. What other sort of thing? What will achieve and how close is it to the vision? So if someone comes up with a project that's not remotely linked with this, it's no good. It's not really relevant. It's somebody that something's been on with for years, but is actually not fitting that initial question. Then you get into the serious stuff. How is this going to happen? How are we going to make these business units get built in Carsiveen? How are we going to make that happen? How do we break it down? How do we break down this project? Who's going to do it? Have we got a volunteer in this group? And I often say to groups, if you have a great vision and you have a wonderful project, but nobody's volunteering, the project doesn't exist. It will exist when somebody comes in and wants to really make it happen and volunteer to make it happen. And expectation was something that I heard in the group, and I heard Sandy talk about it when we were on the call. Sandy and Patrick talk about this expectation. This is about managing expectation. People can have enormous visions and have all the projects in the world, but actually, are they going to volunteer to make it happen? How is it going to be achieved? And furthermore, is the resources there to achieve it? And even furthermore, sorry, I'll just go back to that for a second. If there's somebody there in the room who wants to make it happen, knows how it will happen, and they have a realism about the resources that would actually make them achieve it, then it's not on your head as the rep to make that happen. If you answer those questions, there's a facility within the group to actually make this really happen, and you're literally the messenger carrier at this stage. So group power, prioritize all projects, and I'll come back to how that is actually done. I have a little exercise on it that we can actually do. What structure are you going to use to work together effectively? So for instance, at the moment I'm working with a town in terms of creating a new community council and coming up with a structure for how would that really work in terms of democracy on the one hand and yet getting things done on the other hand. Very tricky. How would it get done? What structure? What type of culture do we want to work with? Those behaviour and values. Start off with something like that. That's how we're going to work here. If we're shouting at each other, I'm not coming to the next meeting, or I'm kicking you out, whatever. So how are you going to nurture that culture? How are you going to enjoy working together? You don't want to be turning up on a Monday night, getting the face bitten off you. You lose all your good people. Next steps. So that if you put all that together, that is the big picture, if you like. And, when ideas come up, it's a way of coming back to your group and saying, let's get back to brass tacks here. So I'm going to just for a second stop share screen, and maybe you'll stop the recording at this stage. So we had a wonderful discussion there about linkage back and the different techniques of being able to come from your own groups, your linkage groups, and present to the county council. And a number of important themes came out. First of all, that fundamentally there need to be a sense of adult respect between the officers in the county council, whatever county council it is, and the PPN group concerned. And it's no fault of any one, it's the responsibility of both, though. And so if an issue if you've raised, like say, 40 issues as a group of people from your local groups and your linkage groups, and at the end of the year only 2 of these have been actioned by the county council, and only a small number have even found their way into the minutes, then there is something really wrong. So the first thing is to prioritise the issues, bring into it, but to have a new culture, have a culture of the fact that if you're coming with a mandated set of projects that they're going to be listened to, you're going to have your voice at the policy committee meeting. Not only that, it's going to be minuted, and not only that, but if it's reasonable and agreed at the meeting, it is going to be acted upon. And in a way, I think there's an ideal opportunity for the PPN to set up an accountability mechanism so that the number of issues you're raising every year and how successful they are at being voiced, how successful they are at being listened to and minuted, and how successful they are at being coming into action. And that is not just a sort of a luxury, that's a requirement of the PPN. And it's a requirement of the county council, it's a requirement of public policy. Secondly, if you're finding it difficult to get a mandate from your group, it can be often, and Sandy came up with a wonderful idea there about being able to sort of form a thematic group in a particular sector or a particular issue, and that gives you the mandate to come back into the process. So I'm going to jump on in my presentation to powerful methods. So again, some of this applies to community groups and might not apply to all your groups, so I'll rush through it really, because I know we're short on time now. I haven't had that wonderful discussion. So the first rule about the powerful methods is you can ask all the questions, but you also have the right methods. Open the door. Invite in as many people as possible. Don't be afraid to invite in. I'm running a project in 3 weeks' time, as I said, and I've told the town, invite in every person, and don't care who's in the room, and be as open as transparent as possible. Tell people what you want to do and who is leading it, because people have suspicions. Who's behind this? Is there somebody making money out of it? So you need to answer all those questions before they're asked. Everyone has a say. Limit large group discussions. Have small groups, thematic groups. Like I said, if you have 40 projects, break it down into 5 themes and let them all be discussed under themes, whether it's youth, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's sport and recreation, whatever. So limit large groups. Break into small groups. And set little rules for those groups, so that they listen to each other. Little things like that. Let them enforce their own rules. Let one person in the group even have the responsibility for shutting somebody up if they're talking too much, or for moving the conversation on, or for keeping it light, or making sure it's respectful. Acknowledge all points. Maybe not every point that was made in your group is worthy of action, but note it. Listen to what's been said. It might be relevant another time. Record everything that's been said. Powerful methods again. Work on themes. Split long lists of projects into emerging themes. Long lists into youth, infrastructure. I mentioned them before. and invite people to form groups, send them away to work with them. That's them taking responsibility. Be objective. Encourage people to prioritise projects in an objective way, identifying what's impactful, what's not impactful, what's easy, what's not easy. And I'll say a little bit more about that, because that's a great way of prioritising projects, because that's a real devil as well. How do you get from prioritise 1 to 5 if you have 5 projects, and do it in a fair manner without upsetting people? How do you access people power? And so that's basically it. You know, a project doesn't exist unless there's somebody with a good backup for it who's prepared to volunteer behind it, and that's in the doing it. And that's just a summary of what I've said there in terms of powerful methods. If you're doing with your group, you may not have to use all of these, but you can use actually some of them. I'm not going to use the breakout session, but here's the thing about prioritizing. It's a very simple method that you might have come across before. So you have a project like, let's build a new sports and recreation centre, or otherwise let's redo the racetrack. 2 projects. They're both in the theme of sport and recreation. So build a new sport and recreation centre. Is it easy? 1 to 5? So if it's 5, it's very easy. If it's 1, it's not easy. So it's maybe not easy. It's a long-term project. What impact is it going to have? You know, so you know, if it has high impact, or if it's very difficult to do, and if it's very impactful, or let's say a project is very impactful and it's very easy to do, then you know you're down here. Something that's very impactful, very easy to do. If it's not easy to do and it's not impactful, it's up here with a lower score. So it's judging things between being easy and being impactful. And if you can look at an exercise like that, and I'm running through it very quickly, that's a way of having a very initial look at a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 without having blood on the wall, if you like, in terms of arguing about the merits of one project over another. And the 2 projects could be done, but just in different timescales. So I won't do the breakout session. So I was going to run an example of a project, but we don't have the time in the presentation. But that's an exercise that you could actually think of doing. Ease and impact. And if it's scoring high on ease and high on impact, then it's the top priority. So I was going to do an example of how you turn projects into themes. So for instance, people might have a community cafe. It could be under a socialisation or connectivity theme, you know. People might want a car lift sharing network. That could be a transport initiative, or it could be an environment initiative. And they're your themes. It's a way of breaking them down. And it's a way of matching sometimes what's in a county council strategic plan, or even the full county plan, which is written according to themes and priorities. And so board committees' roles. So you have organisations of different types, first of all, unincorporated, but they have no legal structure, or they have a legal entity like a company limited by guarantee. And so, for instance, first of all groups should have good governance. And we don't have the time today to go into what is good governance, but obviously good governance is essentially doing hook, line and sinker the 6 principles of the charity's governance code. So that's, that's really, without going into further detail. And unfortunately, the issue of time was mentioned earlier on in terms of the governance code is a time-consuming thing to do, but very necessary. So key officer roles, the chairperson. So if you have a chairperson of a group, they need to be doing these 5 things at the very least. Being leaders, ensure the meeting is run smoothly. They're not the expert. The chairperson should not be the expert, say, I know all about this, this is it. They don't need a group if that's the case. And they're external. They act as a figurehead for the organisation. But earlier on we mentioned about respect and we mentioned about listening. The chairperson's role is to listen to everybody in the group and make sure every voice is heard and that there is action and consensus at the end of it. So I list there some of the key roles of a chairperson. Summarising decisions, for instance. We heard of it where they're there in the chat where we're really coming at the end of a committee meeting. Are we sure what decisions are being made? Are they being minuted? So a good chairperson is looking at what decisions are made and what needs to be acted upon, and the secretary takes the cue from that. So again, just an example there. The chairperson is the person who is the manager of the key member of staff, the manager, the staff, the key person, the CEO, whatever. That's different to the other roles, usually in a committee. So they have to do staff liaison as well. The company secretary, I set out there the key roles, technically, of a company secretary. Particularly now with the governance code, there's overall responsibility for the submission of that. And one of the things I would say about trustees and about officer roles is that although your organisation may be doing them and submitting the reports, it is the responsibility of the trustees to make sure these are done. I won't go through it. It's on the screen there for you to see, and you have the slides, so you'll be able to look at the company secretary role. And more practically, what do they do? And the charities regulator has a really good site on how to write minutes so that they end up as actions. And really, the people have good board packs, that board packs come on time, all those sorts of things. Now, these are easier said than done. We all live busy lives and things sometimes get done at the last minute. But by and large, to try and get ourselves into a position where packs come out on time and the company secretary has a key role in that. And they may have other functions delegated. The other thing that I just want to talk about is conflict of interest. Every organisation really should have a conflict of interest policy and a conflict of loyalties. And that can be often the problem with the community group, not just, the conflict of interest, but maybe, I have a child attending a creche and I'm on the board of the creche. Well, my loyalties might get split between the two, and I might not be able to attend a meeting, or I might have to voice my conflict of loyalty in terms of that. So, every committee should really have a declaration of interest, really, so that the secretary at the beginning of a meeting is clear on where there's a potential for a conflict of interest or a conflict of loyalty, talks to the chairperson, and the chairperson asks for any indications of that before a meeting starts. So that's, again, about smooth running of meetings. Finally, on this roles, I've listed there 16 different roles of a PRO, and you don't have to do them all, but it's a nice checklist going through from, understanding who those stakeholders are that you've seen on the previous slide, or dealing with the media, accountability comes into that to the public, making sure that the organisation is accountable to the public, especially at AGMs, confidentiality, safety of clients. Being positive, and we talked about the positive partnerships, coming together as a positive partnerships. So I won't do the board effectiveness is another thing I wanted to just raise with you, and that is a board effective? And there are the 5 sort of things, and again I'm rushing through them, that you would judge in terms of a board being effective. Is the dynamics positive? What we talked about the groups. Has it got the right subcommittees? Has it got the right structure? Has it got a strategy? Does it know what its vision is? Does it know what its 4, 5 or 6 goals are for the year? And is each meeting interrogating those goals? And that's key. Most committees of organisations forget what the strategy is, and they end up being operational meetings. Now, I know if it's a smaller committee and no staff, they by their nature have to be operational. But if they're a bit larger, or even at any rate, you need to be always interrogating what are our key roles and are we achieving them. Operational performance, that does get into the operations, but that can be a report from a staff member or a volunteer who's working, saying, have we got any problems with our operation? And that's what the board concentrates on. And of course, compliance. So that's a really effective board, is concentrating on those sorts of issues. A different thing is competency. So how competent is each person on a board? 3 things decide that. How knowledgeable are you about? Knowledge means, do I know about it? And knowledge can be, look at, I read the papers, I understand accounts. I'm not an accountant or a bookkeeper, but I understand figures. Skill is a higher level. I can perform the job. I am a bookkeeper, or I work in PR, or I have a skill that I can bring. And perspective, really important. What is perspective? Perspective is the attitude I bring. I represent an area. I represent disability. I represent my traveller group. I represent my gender. I represent a different aspect that I bring to the decisions on this. It's neither a skill nor a knowledge, it's a perspective. And I lay out here some of the sort of knowledge checklist that you might have for a group, from advocacy through to strategic plan, but it's knowledge. How knowledgeable are the group? And you might want to look at your gaps. What gaps have we got here? Equally for skills, what gaps have we got in that list there? And equally around perspective, have we gaps here in our group on these? And you can make up your own list as well. And so therefore, people often ask, we want to have a new board member. It's very useful to go through an exercise like this before going for a new board member, to know exactly what gap are we wanting the new board member to fill. Is it just the number, or what do we want them to bring? We're not going to do the practice agenda. I have a little bit here on effective board meetings, and a checklist right through from the timetable to the circulation of packs, through to dealing with issues, just, if they have issues, dealing right away with them, having quorums, having a venue or a room prepared appropriately and comfortable. Nobody wants to be sitting. And then finally, the governance code, being able to make sure that your board is actually covering the governance code. And here are some links and templates that I have here that will help on understanding the overall role of a trustee or indeed a board member. And even though the governance code only applies technically to charities, it is now the standard for all voluntary organisations in Ireland. And so therefore it's an important thing to look at. So thank you very much for listening to this. I hope it's very useful to you. And thanks to Cork PPN and indeed Cork County Council. And I wish you as linkage members and PPN reps and Secretariat every success. Thank you very much, Liam Scollan.